other ecosystems. I mean, I work with a lot of municipalities, and I can't even get one municipality to agree on recycling with the next municipality over.
Yeah.
So how do we, looking at the global nature of what the Half Earth project would require, get the governance structures around the world to agree on mapping, protecting, all the things that you talked about?
I'm going to turn, pass over that to my colleague again, but before I do, I want to mention that because, this becomes heavily a political and human governmental complexity problem. But I'd like to just mention why, give an answer, why Half Earth?
Okay.
If we get Half Earth set aside, we will lower the extinction rate to pre-human levels for about 85% of all of the existing species. Now, how do we know that? That comes from the theory of island biogeography, which was developed here at Harvard and at Princeton.
By him.
Well, I didn't want to dilute it by but it has been developed further, and it's been tested in the field and so on.
Why don't you
The
explain?
relationship between area in which natural environments can exist and the number of species that can persist there it's still very abstract, but it's at least approximately correct. 1/2, 85% right away. 1/2 the sea, 1/2 the land. Now, can we make 1/2? Well, among the many things that can help make it are urban. Well, I am now talking about it. Anyway, our urban environmental or natural history projects, parks, the kind of enterprise that Chicago created, for example, in its Chicago wilderness, taking every available unused bits of land from vacant lots to riverine, unused pieces of land and so on, mapping them, trying to get them preserved as best as possible, studying, doing taxonomic inventories of them as much as possible, and then getting young people into them for field trips to aid in the mapping process. This sort of thing, I think, could mean drawing a lot of benefit right from the hearts of the cities.
Do you think that when you think about actually doing this, implementing this, one of the impediments that comes up and that John talks about in his book is the fragmentation across all of the groups that could be supportive: health groups, religious groups, environmental groups, historical protection groups, scientists, all different kinds of groups with their own particular way of approaching things, which are very, very fragmented landscape. How can we, and John, you have a whole chapter on this in your book, how can we address this kind of fragmentation around all of the parties that would need to come together to implement and realize a vision like Half Earth?
You're looking at me.
No, well, I'm actually looking at John on this one, yeah.
Well, there's nothing like a crisis to galvanize public support, and we're certainly seeing the manifestation of that across the nation right now with marches for science and for women and for gun control and a number of immigration as well. And the opportunity is really here for coalitions to be built that can really help lead societal change. And where you find the opportunity to find some common ground. All too often we get together and we talk about our differences. And that almost always leads to going back into your silo. There are good examples around the country. We cite a few of them in the book around the Chesapeake Bay, in the Blackfoot Challenge, which is sort of North Glacier National Park, Canadian border, Front Range of the Rockies, where for about 25 years, ranchers, farmers, the timber industry, fishermen, hunters, wildlife biologists, agency people have been working together to create essentially a sustainable ecosystem in the Northern Rockies. And it's been quite successful. And basically they get together in a dive bar called Trixie's and drink beer and talk about how to accomplish small goals and move forward together. And I think that the opportunity is to learn from these lessons, not only domestically but internationally, because I like to say that the U.S. created the national park idea. When it went around the world and came back, it was different. And they've learned in other places around the world to incorporate indigenous people in a much more coherent way than we've ever done here in the United States, or to how to understand larger landscapes, or how to do recovery and restoration of large landscapes as well in other parts of the world. So I think that, to me, we're in this sort of perfect moment in time where there is clearly an assault on the environment from many factors, not just this sort of current administration, but even more broadly than that. There's an assault on science. And the opportunity is to bridge what have been former separations amongst the environmental justice, the social justice, classic environmental, the public health, municipalities, and the hunting, fishing crowd. All of these have some crossover interests. And if we can just take a moment, take some time, focus on those, and look in the long term, we can make some extraordinary strides towards the future conservation.
Mm-hmm.